This is about optimizing your health. And when you optimize your health, your weight will come along with it. Your body habitus will change. Your body composition will change.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Carnivore Revolution. Today, I have with me Dr. Anthony Chaffee, who is a professional rugby player turned doctor who lives in Australia now and is in residency for neurosurgery. And we are super excited that you're here. We can't wait to have this conversation today. Let's kind of dive right into what is the carnivore diet for people that are seeing this and have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the carnivore diet is just eating, meat and just drinking water. So it's sort of what it sounds, just eating what other carnivores would eat in the wild. And, the best available evidence shows that humans are carnivores as well. And so we're going back to an ancestral approach where we're eating what our deep ancestors were eating before the agricultural revolution, where people were taller, stronger, had larger brains, better teeth, and were more healthy from at least the fossil record. In any case, so people are coming to that now and regaining their health and recovering from chronic diseases and things like that. That heretofore people thought were incurable, but in fact are really just caused by eating the wrong food.
And so, what made you start eating this way? Because I know when most people hear about it for the very first time, their reaction is what my reaction was, what everybody's reaction is when they see this for the first time, and they just think this is insane. So, what made you start eating this way?
Well, I started eating this way about 23 years ago when I was in my undergraduate degree at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I took cancer biology. And we were just learning at the time about all the different sorts of carcinogens, but a lot of the different carcinogens that were available in the normal food that we ate, and in particular, the vegetables and produce that we ate. This was, obviously it might be a bit shocking to people and a surprise, maybe not to all your listeners, but, plants defend themselves by being poisonous. That's one of their main defenses. All living creatures have a defense down to single-celled organisms. So while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so, they have a lot of different means of defense, but one of them is by being chemically toxic or having other sorts of defense chemicals that disrupt the animal or insect eating them in some sort of way as to make it not profitable for them to eat that plant. And so we were learning this from a cancer perspective. And so we were looking at carcinogens, and we learned at the time that there were already 136 identified human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts alone, and over 100 in mushrooms, and then spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, and even fruits and other vegetables would have dozens or over 100 known human carcinogens each. And they were actually quite abundant. So we know since the 1980s that there are 10,000 times more naturally occurring toxins in the plants that we eat than the pesticides we spray on them. And that mushrooms, for instance, are 500 times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides we were spraying on them, or at least in that study where they looked at alar, which is one of the pesticides they were using. And so we were very taken aback by that. I remember being very shocked and looking around. Everyone was just thrashing around wildly, looking around like, what in God's name is going on here? Thinking there must be someone in on the joke. Someone in that class must be in on it. And, people just all of a sudden realize it, like, no, he's dead serious. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he must have just read our minds, because he looked at us and sort of gave us a funny look, and he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I was like, right, forget plants. And so I stopped eating them. I went to the grocery store, tried to find food. I was like, well, what in God's name do I eat? And I was just going through, and everything had plants or was plants wholly. And so I came across some eggs, and I was like, okay, eggs don't come from a plant, and meat doesn't come from a plant. So I just defaulted into eating that way because I was just specifically trying to avoid plants. I wanted to eat no plants whatsoever. And so I just ate meat. And I was about 20 at the time, and I was playing high level rugby, the highest leagues in America. I was an All-American rugby player, played in the Canadian Premiership in BC, played in the top US leagues as well, in the Super League and the National One, and then also the Division One collegiate leagues. And for NCAA one, well, it's not NCAA, but the top division for collegiate. And so, yeah, so my athletic performance just went through the roof. My scholastic performance went through the roof. My energy got better. My brain started working better. And really what I really noticed was my fitness and athletic tolerance and exercise tolerance just went to all new heights. And because I was pushing myself so hard, I got full advantage of that. And I just absolutely turned into a machine. And I've just never felt better before or since, except now that I'm doing it again. So I sort of slipped off of that when I was playing rugby in England when I was around 25 after college. And I remember I was slipped off it because some of the meat there was breaded or had some crumbing and things like that, and it was just very convenient to get that. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, is it that big of a deal? Dose makes the poison. It's only a little bit, and it did. It made a big difference. I remember thinking a couple of months into it, when I wasn't feeling my best, I wasn't as just dominating, so I wasn't dominating as much physically as I was used to, and I wasn't as fit. I wasn't just tireless the whole time. And I remember thinking, I was like, okay, well, what's going on? Am I just not pushing myself? Am I not working out as hard? I'm 25 now. Am I just over the hill? And it's just dying from here. And, I didn't really know what it was at the time, but looking back, that was when I sort of slipped off of this way of eating. And the biggest thing that did is it opened the door to eating more things, because now it wasn't in my head of like, I will eat no plants at all whatsoever. It was, oh, well, maybe a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. And then without realizing it, all of a sudden I was just eating a little bit more, having some bread. I was like, oh yeah, there's bread. Oh, I can eat bread. Why haven't I eaten bread? I haven't eaten bread in years. I was like, I just didn't even think of that. Like, well, yeah, because you specifically didn't want to eat bread. So it just slipped off there, which was really funny. And then it wasn't until, 5.5 years ago that I came across information. It was like, no, humans really are carnivores. This is just the kind of animal that we are. And that's what I was doing for those 5 years. And that's what I've never felt better in my entire life. And so I was like, right, I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these stupid things and just start eating meat again. And within 2 weeks, I was back feeling like I was a 22-year-old. Working out for 8 hours a day. I felt absolutely amazing. And my body composition and my health and my fitness just took off from there. I felt absolutely amazing. And I went back to playing high level rugby for the Seattle Seawolves and Saracens, which were my team when I grew up playing. And they were just joined the MLR, the Major League Rugby. And so I was back there playing with them, training with those guys. Unfortunately, I had a knee injury that year, so I couldn't actually play. But I felt great. My body was being, my body felt amazing. So now I've just dug into it. I've dug into the literature and said, okay, what exactly do we know? What can we prove? And I spent months researching things and reading studies. And I've now been applying this to my practice, because if you look at this from the standpoint of medicine, and you look at human beings and our health, and you understand that we are biologically carnivores, but we're not eating as such, all of medicine just starts slotting into place. And all these chronic diseases in particular, they all have explanations now, and all the reasons why they've been dramatically increasing in prevalence year after year after year since the 1970s is very clear now. We're eating the wrong things, and we're going further and further away from our biological design.
And so for the people that are naysayers, that are concerned about this, about vegetables, oh my goodness, I can't believe you don't eat vegetables. What about the Garden of Eden? God wouldn't have given us vegetables that weren't good for us. And so you want to touch on that, about how most of the vegetables and fruits that we have now didn't even exist however many years ago.
Yeah. Well, there is that, and we certainly aren't in the Garden of Eden. None of these plants were in the Garden of Eden, and when we got out of the Garden of Eden, you remember the story of Cain and Abel. Cain was a farmer, and gave his crops as offering to God. God was not happy. Abel was a herder and gave meat as an offering to God. And God was happy. We don't know why. It doesn't go into it more than that, but didn't like the vegetables, definitely liked the meat. And that pissed off Cain, and he ended up killing his brother. And that's sort of the first example of an angry vegan we have. And so the thing is that if you most people know this intuitively. If you get lost in the woods, you cannot just eat any random plant if you run out of food, right? Most plants will cause serious harm or even kill you. And in fact, of the 340,000 or so plants are in the world, there are very, very few that are edible, right? So the rest are inedible. And we know this. I mean, anybody who studies botany or has not, has, gone to school, just been in the woods, had some sort of class, peripherally, will know this, that most plants are inedible. You can't eat them. That's why we have grocery stores and we have farmers. You can't just go to the woods and just pick random leaves, right? You have to know which ones to eat. You have to know which ones to forage. I mean, people die from this, and they have, and they will continue to, if they keep doing this. So it's very important to know which plants to eat. And I'll say, why do they kill you? Why do they make you sick? Because there are poisons in them. Well, that's the same. The same is true of spinach and broccoli. It's just that they have different poisons in them that we have, modicum of capability of detoxifying. And, that's how animals work. So plants and animals are an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more toxic, so less and less animals can eat them, so they can survive and thrive. And animals becoming more and more adapted to specific poisons in specific plants, so they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. Right. But if your species hasn't evolved to eat a specific plant, that plant is bad for you. Right. And this is why animals in the wild, they eat very specific plants, if they eat plants at all. Only 30% of animals even eat plants. 70% of animals are carnivores, and 70% or so of animals that have ever existed were carnivores, because it's much, much easier to take animal tissue and turn that into your own animal tissue than to break down and turn plant tissue and turn that into animal tissue. Because that's actually very, very difficult. And you're contending with all these toxins, and you're contending with bioavailability, which is the plant trying to sequester nutrients and bind it up in chemical bonds in such a way that, we can't break it down, or other animals can't break it down. So yes, there might be niacin, there might be iron, there might be calcium in that plant, but you're not going to get it or you're not going to get much of it, because it's not bioavailable. It's bound up in ways that we can't get. And there are a whole bunch of different chemicals and things like that, phytic acid, tannins, oxalates, things of that nature that will bind and disrupt the nutrients that we're trying to eat, even from very bioavailable food like meat, and make that not bioavailable. So there are many, 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 many different varieties of toxins and different ways that plants can defend themselves. And so, people just need to understand that, look at nature. Animals that eat plants, they eat very specific plants. There's 340,000 plants in the world. Koalas eat one. Pandas eat one. Cows, horses, grazing animals eat grass, and that's it. And they eat specific grasses. They eat, cows and sheep eat different grasses from each other, so you can pasture them on the same land. And if they eat different grasses or they eat different plants, they will get sick or die. And this is well known in veterinary medicine and livestock animal husbandry, right? And so, the leaves that a deer eats are different from the leaves that a gorilla eats. Those are different from the leaves that a giraffe eats, and so on. And you mix those leaves around, they all get sick or die, right? So all the best available evidence shows that humans were herbivorous around 6 to 8 million years ago, and then they started eating more meat, more and more meat, had more adaptations going towards our current iteration. And then for the last sort of 3 million years or so, the first work stone tool with a sharp edge was about 3.3 million years ago with Australopithecus. And then before that, there were pound stones used to crack open the skulls of carrion animals and get at the brain. So our ancestors were scavengers. And then, after that, the first, true humans, Homo habilis, they were able to use different tools and things like that. They were actually able to hunt larger game. And then the ice ages hit in, and the ones that survived are, that begat us. They were the ones that were able to hunt. They were the ones that were able to survive in those conditions with this big game and hunting. And people say, well, people were actually moving towards the equator when that happened. That's completely made up. That's absolutely made up. That's just someone guessing, because it has to be that way for it to fit their narrative, right? Because you can't grow crops or find plants in an ice age. There are no plants, right? And so the fact of the matter is that the fossil record shows that they were actually moving up into the ice shelves when the ice ages were starting. So in fact, we weren't going towards the equator and running away from the cold. We were attacking into the cold, and presumably because that's where the megafauna was, and that's where they wanted to be to hunt their game. So they were able to survive as pure carnivores, and we have been basically pure carnivores since then. Now, can we survive on other things? Yeah, absolutely. And that's conferred a survival advantage in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean that it's healthy. That doesn't mean that it's the most healthy. It doesn't mean that it's optimal. It doesn't mean that we should do that. Just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should do something. We could take cocaine and do heroin. That doesn't mean that that's good for us. It doesn't mean we should do that. So it's just a matter of recognizing that and recognizing our heritage and our biological design, and understanding that plants are not your friend. We're not in the Garden of Eden. And like you said, the plants that we're eating nowadays, let's say that we are designed to eat these plants, or designed to eat some plants, right? Well, it would be very specific plants. It would be a few different kinds of plants, or maybe a family of plants that we have defenses for. But which plants were around back then that we eat now? None. The plants that we eat now are all bioengineered. They're all, through crossbreeding and intensive, agriculture, they were changed from their original form. Very, very different plants. And so the plants that we eat now, the fruit that we eat now, just did not exist. Some of them even 100 years ago, or hundreds of years ago, certainly not thousands of years ago, and certainly not many more thousands of years ago. So the idea that we are biologically designed to eat plants that didn't exist doesn't make any sense. And especially with different sorts of plant-based products like seed oils, those things are less than 100 years old. How are we designed to eat that? How is that an appropriate fat? How is that an essential fat? If it didn't even exist, and then saturated fat and meat, something that's always existed, always. How is that all of a sudden bad for us? How is that toxic to us when it's not toxic to 70% of the animal species, right? Why is it causing heart disease in us? And it doesn't even cause heart disease in a cow. You can actually feed other animals. They're other herbivores. You can feed them meat, and they do great. They get a lot of nutrients out of it. That's because it's animal tissue. It's good for them, right? It doesn't give them heart disease, right? It doesn't make them sick, but somehow it makes us sick. We're just the only animals on earth that get sick from that. So it really doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't make sense to anyone if they really think about it, I think.
So you mentioned cocaine and heroin. So I want to touch on that for a minute, not the actual cocaine and heroin, but the fact that not everybody, a lot of people have a drug of choice, right? So mine was sugar and carbohydrates. And I would argue that most of the people in the United States and most other unhealthy civilized countries are drug addicts in the way of sugar and carbohydrates and junk food and things like that. So what do you think is the best way? Like one of the things I was thinking about is when somebody goes to a party and they decide not to eat a cookie, it's not usually for health reasons. It's usually because they're watching their weight or they're trying to lose weight, right? It's because they're on a diet. And what is the best way, do you think, that we can change the narrative from weight to health and get people to understand that that it's not always about weight, that it should be more about health, because that cookie isn't going to be as damaging to you in weight as it's going to be to your health? What do you think the best way we can get that message out is?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. It's just reiterating that health is more important. If you do eat healthy, if you eat to your biological design, you will lose weight. You will lose excess fat. But not everybody loses it as quickly as others. I mean, there are many people that go on a carnivore diet and have a dramatic weight loss and health recovery, but not everyone does. It's a small proportion, but there are some people that don't lose really any fat at first, or maybe even put on weight, depending on what's going on with them biologically, or really their history with dieting and the different things that they've been eating, how their hormones and metabolism are running at the moment. But I do find that it's very helpful to stress that this is about health. This is about eating your biologically appropriate diet so that you gain health, and weight will come. Fat loss will come, but that shouldn't be the driving force. It is about recovering your health. I mean, there's so many people that do get stuck on the weight loss side of things, and they end up maybe going away from it just because they're like, well, I didn't have the weight loss that I wanted, and I have to lose weight. And so they try something else, and maybe they go back to how they were eating, which obviously didn't help in the first place. It got them in the position that they were in at the moment. But you talk to them and they say, Well, I really wish carnivore worked for me because I felt so great. I had wonderful energy. I slept so well. I came off my medications. My autoimmune issue went into remission, and all these things were great. But I wasn't losing weight, so I guess it just doesn't work for me. And to me, it sounds like it was working amazingly well. That all these things were working very, very well. So I think it's just a matter of impressing that upon people. Is that you need to do this for your health. This is optimal health. This is not a diet. This is not a crash diet so you can fit into some clothing so you can go to a wedding or something like that. This is about optimizing your health. And when you optimize your health, your weight will come along with it. Your body habitus will change. Your body composition will change. Not everybody will get back to what they were like when they were 16, but you can improve your health and your appearance as well quite dramatically. But the most important thing is your health. We're trying to get people off medications. We're trying to get them off supplements. We're trying to get them away from expensive procedures that aren't really providing them help. They're just sort of perpetuating a disease state, and to stop them from needing these very, very intrusive, expensive, and dangerous interventions in the future, and from dying early and not enjoying their life. So it really is just about feeling as good as you possibly can. And I think that's the main message that we need to push out as proponents of the carnivore diet. Is this is about optimal health. Because there are a lot of diets that say, hey, you can lose weight, isn't that great? And that's how they pitch it. But maybe they get very unwell and they don't feel good, and there are a lot of side effects from that, and it's not sustainable. This is sustainable. This is something that you can do your entire life, and you need to think about it that way. You need to think about this. I'm going to eat to my biological design. I'm going to eat the most healthy food that's available to me, and whether I lose weight or not, I want to do this because this is what's going to make me as healthy as I possibly can be.
So on that topic, let's touch on Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's disease. There is real evidence that shows that when people are having those kinds of brain issues, that a lot of times it's from low cholesterol. There are, I read about a study where you take people off of their statin, their cholesterol lowering drug, and a lot of times their dementia gets better. You put them back on the medication and their dementia gets worse. And I just wonder at what point, like, why do we keep doing this? Why is there not more push for science and studies about those kinds of things to help us to make sense of this and help people that are actually struggling with those things?
Yeah, it is interesting. There, I know. So you're talking about. So they looked at. There are particular statins that can cross the blood-brain barrier and get into your brain. Your brain is made out of fat and cholesterol. It's predominantly the building blocks of our brain and the rest of our body. And so when you put people on those statins that can cross the blood-brain barrier, they interrupt your brain's ability to make cholesterol, which your brain makes cholesterol because it needs it to grow. There are studies that show that there's likely a mechanism of cholesterol crossing the blood-brain barrier by breaking down into constituent parts and then crossing over and then reconstituting once they're through. But your brain can make it, and your and the statins that you take can interrupt that. And so if you're first of all, like, think about the myelination, right? So the myelination of your axon. So you have your nerve cell, the cell body, and have an axon coming down. So it's like the computer with a wire coming down to connect it to something else, right? That axon needs to be myelinated and needs to have this insulation that increases the conductivity and increases the speed of the signal propagation. So the actual, processor speed of your brain. Right. And so that's made out of saturated fat and cholesterol. And so when you don't have enough fat or cholesterol, then that myelination gets thin, that conductivity goes down, and the signal slows down. Right. So think about kids, like infants, they're uncoordinated, can't really pick things up. They can't walk, they can't stand. They don't have properly myelinated nerves. And that's what that looks like. And so as the nervous system is developing and starts myelinating and becoming more robust, then they start developing that coordination, right? Because the signal from their brain to their hand or their right foot, they're falling forward. They're like, oh, I need to move my foot forward. And it just takes longer to get there. And so they can't catch themselves and they fall, right? So that can happen when we age. because our brain is constantly being remodeled and remade and rebuilt and repaired. And so if you're not able to do that, if you're not able to stay up with the upkeep, it will break down, it will degrade. And that's what we get with dementia and Alzheimer's. So you're right. They show that when people are on that statin that crosses the blood-brain barrier, they get what appears to be a reversible kind of Alzheimer's. So they have these people that are in nursing homes with Alzheimer's, and it's like, oh, it's just so sad. My dad doesn't even recognize me anymore. And then you take them off this statin. 6 weeks later, all of a sudden they don't have Alzheimer's. Okay, did they ever have Alzheimer's? Well, probably not. It's probably there's just the effects of this medication. And then what do you know? They put them back on the medication, and 6 weeks later they have Alzheimer's again. Isn't that strange? And so that's iatrogenic. That's caused by the medication that we're giving these people. Alzheimer's has actually been referred to as type 3 diabetes recently because of insulin resistance and things like that, right? So, and you can see this, it manifested when you go onto a ketogenic diet, right? Because you get insulin resistance. Peripheral insulin resistance is the hallmark of type 2 diabetes, right? Well, your brain is part of that, right? So if you're not able to get glucose and sugar into your brain to fuel your brain, well, it's not going to have enough energy. It's not going to be able to run properly, and slowly over years, it's going to degrade and break down. And they're probably on a low fat, so-called heart healthy diet, and their brain's not getting enough fat and cholesterol and things like that. Maybe they're on a statin as well. And so, they degrade and they get worse. But, if you put them onto a ketogenic diet, within days, they will start to do much better cognitively. And that's because ketones don't need insulin to get into your brain cells that cross the blood-brain barrier. They even reconstitute into fatty acids, which can help become the constituents of the brain and the physical structures of the brain. Your brain always runs on ketones, always. Whenever there are ketones there, your brain is running on it. And as you build up the amount of ketones you have in your system, your brain runs on all the available ketones it can, and less glucose as needed, right? It's only filling in the gaps with glucose. And once there's enough ketones, even if there's an abundance of glucose, your brain only runs on the ketones, right? So that means it prefers ketones, right? Because you'll always be making glucose. Even in ketosis, you'll have normal blood sugar levels and glycogen, right? So there's available blood sugar, but now you have an abundance of ketones, and so your brain just runs on ketones, right? And that's what your brain prefers to run on. And so all of a sudden you don't need this, and the insulin resistance doesn't matter, and your brain's running on ketones. It goes, oh, and they do much better. So there are studies showing that when put on a ketogenic diet, people with full-blown Alzheimer's, that it's actually a better treatment for Alzheimer's than every medication ever studied, right? So that's very, very important as well to think about.
Yeah, I think it's truly amazing how the brain works and how much we need the cholesterol, and we've been pushed so far to the other side of all of that. It's really hard for people to discern what the truth is. And I feel like, people will say, but being a carnivore is so expensive. Meat is so expensive. I can't afford to buy that much meat. But honestly, you save money, and being unhealthy really is way more expensive than buying some beef.
Yeah, well, and also, beef costs less per pound than spinach. Not many people know that. It's just you buy it 3 ounces at a time. So it's like, oh, it's $5 for a bag of spinach, and it's $20 for a steak. Okay, well, that's 3 ounces of spinach, and it's 16 ounces of steak, right? And you don't have to buy steak. You can buy ground beef. You can buy chicken and fish or pork or whatever you want. And if you're just doing beef, you can. And ground beef is great. It's fine. It's still cow. There's no difference in nutrient content really between ground beef and a ribeye steak, except depending on whatever the fat content is. So it's actually a bit misleading, because most people, when they go on a carnivore diet, they actually spend a lot less, because you're not getting all the junk. You're not having all the snacks. You're not having 3 meals a day and 3 snacks a day. You're not having Starbucks. You're not having, all these different little sorts of fiddly things. And generally people don't eat out as much because they don't want random things put into their food. They only eat once a day, quite often, or maybe twice a day. Some people, more, but a lot of the time people find that they're eating less often, because if you're eating higher density food, you don't need to eat as much or as often. And so if I'm just working at the hospital or in the office, and I'm sedentary, I don't get a chance to work out, I'm only eating once a day, but I'm eating until I'm full. And then I don't need to eat again for another 24 hours. If I'm working out, I'm being more active, then yeah, generally I'll eat twice a day, but it's actually quite a lot less. It's much more convenient. I don't need to like stop for lunch. I don't need to, oh my God, I have to pick something. Oh my God, I have to buy something. Because when you're hungry and you're sort of panicking that you make those bad decisions and you spend money that you don't really, that you really shouldn't. And you eat something that you shouldn't because, oh, I have to eat, I have to eat, I have to eat, I have to eat something. And that adds up. It adds up very, very quickly. And it's, you end up eating things that are just absolutely rotten for you.
Yeah. So what's a typical day of eating look like for you?
Oh, usually just a big steak in the evenings. That's really it. So, I don't really get hungry in the morning. I generally don't have breakfast, don't slow down for lunch. I'm able to just work or do whatever I'm doing and just enjoy my time, enjoy my day. And I have so much more free time. I'm not thinking about cooking or eating food, right? And so I just do whatever I want to do with the day, and then come back in the evening. Maybe I get a chance to work out, maybe I don't. But I always eat after I work out. I wouldn't. I just don't. You get naturally lethargic after you eat a big meal. You're diverting a lot of blood to your intestines, and you're going into a rest and digest metabolism as opposed to a fight or flight, go kill some caribou sort of metabolism, right? And so I just eat at night, and it's generally big steak. 99% of what I eat is beef.
Yeah. And I'm finding that as a mom, and with, the kids and my husband and just being busy, I save so much time not being in the kitchen as much because it's super easy to throw some burgers on the grill or throw some steaks on the grill. And I find the cooking to be a lot easier. So what is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody new, somebody who's considering it, somebody with health issues, somebody who needs the carnivore diet? What's the one piece of advice you would offer to somebody?
Well, I mean, I think just look into it, and you can certainly look at my videos and other people's videos, and then the opposition, look at different people pitching a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet or an omnivore diet, and just see what people are laying out there, and just see the evidence they're putting out there, and then make a decision for yourself. If you think that that's something that makes sense to you, and you feel that the advice that you've had from doctors and all these other people that have been giving us the same advice, low fat, not a lot of meat, more fruits and vegetables. They've been saying that for the last 40 years, and people are getting fatter and sicker than we have ever been in human history. So, something's wrong. And so, maybe breaking away from that paradigm is probably the best thing that you can do. And then just give it a try. Try it for 30 days. It's 30 days. I mean, you're not going to get scurvy in 30 days anyway, and so, and I haven't gotten scurvy in 6 years. And in fact, you don't need as much vitamin C if you're not eating carbohydrates and other plants, because they disrupt how your body utilizes vitamin C. So you need far less. And so 30 days is nothing. But what you'll find is in 2 weeks, most of this junk and plant toxins will get out of your system, and you'll start feeling better than you ever have in your entire life. And then after that, your body will just start transforming. You'll have energy like you've never had before. You'll feel, 10 years younger, and you'll just get better and better and better as you go. And so you'll have a good solid 2 weeks at the end of that 30 days. Well, you feel absolutely amazing. And then decide from there, is that's a feeling that you like, and that's something you want to perpetuate, go for it. If you have autoimmune issues, they go away on a carnivore diet, because they're not diseases. They're exposure. Your body's reacting to something that you're eating, something you're being exposed to, generally by eating. And you're reacting to them, and your body's making antibodies towards them, and they're cross-reacting with your own body. So you eliminate these things out of your body, you get rid of them, and then you stop making antibodies, and they stop attacking your own body. And I see this every single day in practice, and speaking to people online. So especially with people with autoimmune issues, diabetes, that's been clinically proven to be reversible on a ketogenic diet when you're eliminating all these things, especially seed oils. And that's what carnivore does. It's a perfect elimination diet. It gets rid of everything that you don't want and has everything you need. It only has the bare essentials. It just has pure nutrition and doesn't have anything else. And so that's exactly what you want. You just want nutrition. Like you said, that people have drug addictions. We are treating food like we do drugs. We say, well, drugs are bad for me, alcohol is bad for me, smoking is bad for me. I know that, but I enjoy the experience. And so that's worth it to them. They don't realize how much it's going to cost them down the line. But then other people, eat food and like, well, but I enjoy this, so I want to do this. And so I'm just going to do it anyway because I enjoy it. Okay, so you're doing the same thing. You enjoy the experience of eating that cake or that salad. If I don't know why, but and maybe some bread or pizza or something like that. You enjoy that experience, that taste explosion, but you're doing it at a sacrifice, and you are. So it's that same relationship, that same thought process that we use for justifying our use of drugs and alcohol. We're doing that for food as well. And so it's really nice to get away from that and just use food as nutrition, and then actually have a nice life that you can enjoy instead of having food be your enjoyment, drugs be your enjoyment, alcohol be your enjoyment, those sorts of things. You can actually do things that are interesting and fun. And I think that most people will find that that's much more enjoyable. And if you don't, fine. If you prefer eating pizza to being healthy and normal weight and muscular and athletic and having your brain work properly and losing 200 pounds and getting off medications and getting away from all these health problems, fine. But if that's something that you do want to do, you do want to fix your health, you do want to get off medications and stop being crippled by chronic disease, then this is definitely something to try.
Yeah, and it's really all about the idea of eating to live instead of living to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. It's really all just about nutrition. So
Yeah,
thank you for hanging
it.
out with me this morning.
You're welcome.
It was awesome. Every single time we talk, I learned something new. So thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time here on the Carnivore Revolution.